Well, it's great to be in Barcelona. It's starting to get cold and rainy in the U.S. And, on my way here, I stopped by Stockholm, and it was kind of cold and rainy there, too. So it was beautiful here. I'm appreciating that. Thanks so much for coming out. We are very excited to have our first ever OpenPOWER Summit for Europe. Obviously, we've been around for a few years and really excited that we're here in Europe to talk about what we're doing on the continent, as well as how the global reach and global influence is sort of bringing us together and helping us to cultivate this community. So thanks again for coming out. Hopefully some of you have gotten a chance to enjoy some of the OpenStack stuff across the street. It's great when our communities have such a strong complement with one another. So I'm the president, John is the chairman. Together we are sort of co-captaining this vessel. Our Twitter addresses are up there if you have something nice to say about us. If you don't, we'll have a smart reply back for you, so don't worry about it. There's a reason that communities like OpenPOWER come together. It's essential for all of us to sort of appreciate that the industry is not standing still, and neither are we. In fact, I would assert that if you're in this room today, you are not a spectator. You're one of the folks that are rolling up their sleeves. You're part of this community that is saying that we could do things different. We could reinvent. We could have new business models. We have so much more to do, right? And there's a lot around us that's happening already. The explosion in data, the transaction growth, the things that are happening just by a mere click of your phone. When you tap that phone, you may have just fired off 20 to 50 different transactions across a wide sphere of technologies. That data could be used for something, could become useful insight to change how businesses work, to reinvent how business happens, or to reinvent how research happens, how other ways that we're advancing our society are happening. And that brings us to kind of the forays of analytics. HPC used to be relegated to the hallowed halls of research and universities and the deep thinkers. That deep thinking is just as important to retail supply chains, to telecommunications, to others across various industries. That deep thinking needs to happen in real time, right? Sort of the time value of information. We're no longer content to look at historical information. In fact, we're not always even content to look at information as it's happening. We want to look at predictive information that can help inform us strategically, can help inform us in the moment for decisions we make impacting our business now to decisions that are going forward for our business. And this brings me to the last point here that, I think as much as each of our end users and clients and folks have an open strategy, they also have a cloud strategy. Regardless of whether they have a stronger on-prem strategy of running their data centers, of facilitating their workloads, they are still pulling in information from across multiple different domains to gather that insight. So there are a lot of these industry things that are in motion that are causing us to sort of rethink the way we do business. Now, I know Uber is, I think, a little bit more popular in the United States. In fact, in Germany, I don't think they allow it at all. It was really hard for me to understand how to get from point A to point B. And not here in Spain either. I've been in some cabs here. But, the Uber syndrome, for those of you who are familiar with what Uber is doing, it's sort of disaggregating a business model of a sort of a taxi service or a black car service, depending on what mode you operate in. And relegating that to, a community, right? A community of drivers who have cars and services to offer, and a community of end users who need a ride from point A to point B. This has changed the business model for this part of our economy. And by the way, this notion of sort of, I've got a service or good to provide and I need one over here, that's like from the dawn of time. Right? I think a lot of us used to call that the village, like the village that's raising my kids right now. So across the village, we have goods to offer and goods that we need, right? So this Uberization of a business model, or this sharing economy that we're developing, it matters in IT as well, right? Many of our strategies are predicated on open source technology, open source software. And those are the same types of elements that we're sharing. I have an expertise in one domain. Someone else has a challenge in another. Let's bring those things together. So that's where OpenPOWER is coming from, right? The notion that if we bring profound transparency to the underlying infrastructure, we can borrow some of the religion from open source software and bring it down into the hardware layers. This will help us overcome things like the plateau of Moore's Law, where we can no longer rely on the next generation of transistors alone. The transistors scaling, right? Because we're starting to hit some of those walls. We're starting to hit technical innovation walls in the CPU alone. So we're going to rely on a variety, a choice of technologies to tackle those challenges. Maybe you want to offload some of that work to a CPU or to a GPU for accelerated computing. Lots of different things you can do. So we wanted to bring together the thought leaders in the industry who could help enact that level of innovation the fastest. We've already talked about the growing demands of your workloads, whether it's looking to get more deeper analysis, or whether it's reflecting and reacting to the changes in your particular industry. Maybe it's shortening the time to value of doing some genome sequencing. That actually changes an industry, the more you can do that, right? The IT consumption models. This is also really important to us. I mean, whether you're consuming your IT by going directly to Taiwan and having a white box provider put together a system for your particular need, or you're consuming your technology purely through the cloud. There's a huge variety of options, and we need to be adaptive to that. So we're building out this community. We're building a community because it's not a one-to-one transaction. We are building an OpenPOWER community that fosters and looks for that long-term shared success of each one of its constituents. So we've come a long way. We're about 3 years old now. So we're still kind of in toddler phase. Maybe we're in teenager phase. It's hard to say in internet time, right? But we're up to 12 work groups. These are the base building blocks that as a community we're building together, where we have shared specifications, pieces of code, reference designs, other things that are useful to the broader community. We've come a long way in our membership. Here's just a nice, great snapshot of who we've brought on board across Europe. There are about 60 different members here. And they're very active and have been very deeply engaged across a variety of initiatives. You'll hear about some of those today from these guys. So I'm sorry, it looks like people are still taking pictures. Take lots of pictures. And by the way, these will be available later as well. But we're exceptionally proud of the traction that we're getting in Europe. I mean, we've got a lot of HPC stuff going on. We've got a lot of scale-out workloads that we're seeing. And this is because of the, sort of the collaboration and innovation that we can bring together. So again, you're going to hear from some of these guys today, but I'm going to hand it over now to John Zanos, who's going to talk a little bit about, so where do we go from here? I've given you a little bit of a historical context setting bit, and he's going to sort of help bring us to where do we take it from here? What are some of those priorities?
Thank you, Calista. So, Calista has set the stage of what we've done over the last 3 years, and I think it's great progress. I'm going to spend some time talking about what we plan to do in the next year and beyond, and really bear down on 3 tenets that we're going to focus our attention, because we are seeing great traction, and we are part of a very big revolution in the marketplace, which I like to call collaborative innovation, which is breaking boundaries between companies in terms of talking through how do you create new technology advances. We're going to continue to be very focused on collaboration across both the software and the hardware side of the equation. When I was first approached to be part of what we're doing in OpenPOWER, as well as our company And obviously, with what we do with Ubuntu as an operating system, we're in many, many open forums. What really intrigued me, it was an effort not only to be focused on collaboration and innovation around the hardware side of the equation, because we have OCP and other great progress in that space, but at the same time, on the software side, on the OS and on the application side. And of course, we have lots of innovation going on there, Linux Foundation, open networking, ONOS, ODL. Well, I have 5 minutes. This is going to be interesting. We're already going to be behind schedule. I apologize in advance. This is kind of how it usually goes with Callista and I. It was that time in the cab. I don't know. So the next thing is we're going to be focused on doing this across communities, right? This collaboration, breaking boundaries between industries and individual companies also is weaving together across open communities. Currently with the Linux Foundation, Open Compute, HPC, but also with OpenStack, which obviously is right across the street, and I'm sure many of you have spent the day at. As an illustration of this, what we see is an opportunity to weave these together to create solutions. So, for example, Penguin, Stack Velocity, IBM have come forward with an OCP framework with OpenPOWER technology embedded with OpenStack. So, lots of open, but what we're building those bridges, and we're going to really focus on that in the next year and strengthen those bonds, because that's really important, because that's one thing I think we all maybe experience is a little bit of what I call foundation fatigue. I get one every other day in terms of to join, and obviously there's only so many engineers in every company and only so many coders, so we're trying to make sure investments in one foundation can be leveraged by another, and I think that's very important. We're also going to be focused on what we talk about composable pieces or Lego blocks. The idea that components, systems, operating systems, applications themselves are going to be woven together to create solutions. We're seeing a very interesting change in the marketplace. We see that cloud and open source models have enabled people to think about their data centers in different ways. And they're starting to think about them from the application down. What's my business problem? What's the application that's going to solve that? And given that the infrastructure, like what we're doing with OpenPOWER, is transparent and visible, the application can start thinking about what is out there in the hardware stack that I can really take advantage of to be most performant. And this is really relevant in terms of, as Callista pointed out, taking HPC methodologies and bringing them into the enterprise, because what does the enterprise care about? Rapid decisions, rapid business decisions that are really smart. And not only smart, but quick. And how do we do that? We do that with data analytics. And the way the applications are able to perform at that level is to take full advantage of things that are in the hardware stack. So we're breaking what I think has historically been some boundaries in terms of transparency, and I think that's very exciting. And everybody that runs an application, is anybody not running some sort of application in their data center? Okay, this is just obviously we're not awake, or I'm not keeping you awake. Who has a data center? Anybody. Who touches a piece of hardware anytime in their career? All right. I assume at some point you ran a piece of software on that piece of hardware. At least your phone, right? We love applications. Okay. So the reason I bring this up, this is the last part that we're really going to focus on. This focus is about making sure we're building a real functioning ecosystem. An ecosystem that looks across the software stack into the hardware stack and encourages innovation across both. My mantra here is this is just about customer choice, right? And what does that mean? That means making sure the application is as performant as it can be because it's accessing hardware that allows it to do so. And that can be any platform. And what we're trying to do in OpenPOWER is make sure what we do is encourage that transparency, so developers are writing code and saying, you know what? I would really benefit from using CAPI. And for example, the announcement recently done around OpenCAPI I thought was really interesting, because that was across HP, Dell, and Google, leveraging this CAPI technology. What's important is not only the names, but what's important is using technology that everybody can see early on. And when they see it, we're able to apply it in industries like genomic research, financial services, oil and gas, retail. Because at the end of the day, what do all these industries want to do? They want to make smart business decisions, and they want to make it quickly. So we see areas like data analytics, genomic research, university research. These are the sort of people that we're adding to the ecosystem, as well as customers and partners in telecom industries and other industries. So, I'm running a little bit over, but not too bad. So how do we know we're on the right track? How are we building an ecosystem? We have 275 members, if I remember, as of today, in many, many different segments, as you can see. More importantly, that's an increase from 166 just at the beginning of the year. But I'll give you a couple stats that I think are even more important from the perspective of somebody that is in the software half of this equation. We have over 100,000 Linux applications running on Power. Now, that's a sizable amount given, I'll say a young teenager that's been around for 3 years in OpenPOWER. We have more than 2,300 ISVs that have written code on Linux to utilize the benefits of OpenPOWER. We have this sort of ecosystem every day trying to help those developers figure out how they can make their code most performant. So we have people like Kinetica, who's utilized for database solutions in retail. We have software that's both open source and proprietary in this model. We are focusing in areas of university research, genomics, as I mentioned, HPC in general, oil and gas, financial services, telecom. So for me, the yardstick ultimately, have we made advances in technology? Absolutely. Are those advances open? Absolutely. Those are foundations of what we're doing. Equally important is that we see an ecosystem building that is taking advantage of that. And what was really innovative to me in the beginning of this journey, when we were first approached, is that we're trying to build this foundation to drive innovation both on the software side as well on the hardware, and making sure that process is transparent and iterative. And hopefully we're making the code better for whatever application can sit upon whatever platform, in this case OpenPOWER, and we're helping the infrastructure providers make sure they talk to developers and drive innovation that's fully utilized. So that's where we're going. I think that stops our introduction, 5 or so minutes over. And I'll give it back to you.